Isagi and Hioris first interacted in the third selection as they were paired up during their tryout match, both picking the same team which had the two top players leading their team at the time, those being Rin and Shida. During their tryout match, they played against Karasu and Otoya, the ranked number 3 and number 4 player, and also their team, which ended up being a very tough challenge, leading to both teams eventually drawing at 4 goals each in a first to 5 goal game. This led to Isagi contemplating to himself in how he could be included into the match. What should he do to prove his worth? Isagi found it to be a huge struggle to find what piece to the puzzle he was missing to get the edge over the top 4 players of Blue Lock, until Hiyori approached him with a thought of his own regarding how Isagi should start playing. If you think it out then move, that's too slow. Seeing, thinking, moving, the speed of that process may have worked against your opponents you faced previously, but it's a different story when you're competing for goals with Rin and Shido. Why not try thinking reflexively? In another translation, this advice directly states that Isagi, instead of thinking before acting, should move whilst thinking, to always be in the most optimal positions before executing his plans, which in turn would give him the upper hand, as he would be much earlier in making his plays, and therefore either catching his opponents off guard whilst they're making plays of their own, or giving his opponents no time to react to get to the ball and figure out what they should do unless they adopted the same mindset, thinking and moving reflexively and simultaneously. This new theory of thinking eventually led to Isagi obtaining the first glimpse of the immense state of absolute focus known as flow, residing between the balance of anxiety and boredom, with Hiyori's advice being the reason why he tapped into it. And with this knowledge we can finally kick off our what if. Our story begins during the second selection where Isagi, Nagi and Bachelor had just lost their match against the second selection top 3 players, Rin, Ayu and Tokimitsu. Following the same path as the original story, Rin's team selects Bachelor and advances to the next stage, leaving Isagi and Nagi needing to beat 2 different teams to select 2 new teammates to rematch Rin's team. This is where our changes in the story take effect. In the original, this is where Isagi would have had a breakdown doubting his abilities as a striker after being completely demolished in his plans to win against Rin's team and fearing of not being picked if him and Nagi lose again. However, this time Isagi begins to reassess on what he'd done wrong in that match, only to realise that his current way of playing, he had done all that he could. So if he wasn't able to win at his best in his current state, he needed to evolve and adapt to the new standards of skill in this stage of Blue Lock. Nagi spoke up about their loss looking to Isagi only to find him completely lost in his own thoughts. Nagi saw this and picked up on how Isagi was finding his own way to step up now that they're a member down. Nagi simply stood quiet, waiting for Isagi to come up with his own solution. Now, I won't be introducing Hiyori early, only the advice that Isagi got from him. So if that's the case, you are all probably wondering how will Isagi gain the advice of Hiyori when he hasn't even appeared in the series at this point? Well, to put it simply, Isagi has always found a way to improve himself whenever he would be put in dire situations. He learns the way his teammates play or opponents play because he's an adaptive player and is not afraid to change if it allows him to become a better player. This has been evident throughout the entire series, making him come to conclusions after losing. What he is doing currently will not cut it in the long run. Blue Lock players find their own way to evolve their talents and weapons, and Isagi is no exception. Thanks to his insanely high football IQ, which keeps growing throughout the series, he comes up with his own solutions on his own eventually. And since this is a what if after all, the scenario has to play out somehow, so let's just say he takes some time to figure out for himself. Isagi begins to think of how he only moves and reacts after thinking and seeing, instead of moving reflexively, moving by his own intuition. He thinks back to small instances where he had done this without even knowing it, so it's always been there, but he's never realized that it was possible until he started pondering on this idea. He begins to slowly deconstruct himself, finding the necessary puzzle pieces to create this whole new theory. If he can move by reflex first, then whilst moving, think of what he needs to do to gain the upper hand, he will not only decrease the amount of time it takes to execute his plans, but also will be able to get to the ball before his opponent. But without this theory, he was at the disadvantage thinking, seeing and then moving because of his physical abilities being worse than most players in Blue Lock. So to switch around the steps to gain an edge which will improve his efficiency of reaching his final play is what he needs to do in order to compete with the geniuses. Events continue much like normal when Naruhaya, who teams with Baru, challenges Isagi and Nagi to a 2-on-2. Naruhaya stating that neither him or Isagi would be picked if they lost, since they're simply less talented and less skilled compared to the geniuses on their team. However, this angered Isagi, as through his evaluation, he believes the new solution will prove to be effective against Baru and Naruhaya, and can also help him with making a chemical reaction between himself and Nagi to completely destroy them. The kickoff begins. Nagi had started with the pass ball and seeks to challenge Baru to a 1-on-1, in which due to Nagi's lack of dribbling skills, loses the ball immediately. but Baru is already met by Isagi, who is much closer to him than expected. Isagi put his new way of thinking into action immediately, resulting in him already moving around the pitch in preparation for where he believes the ball is most likely to be, acting on reflex to his spatial awareness. This pressures Baru to make a sudden shot outside of his middle strike range of 29 meters. Instead, he shoots 33 meters away from the goal, and the shot is barely saved by Blue Lock Man. Naruhaya attempts to retrieve the ball to score himself, but Nagi is quick to intercept, taking the loose ball to dribble upfield. Nagi then sees that Baru is charging directly to him, intending on stealing the ball from him once again. But Nagi has also seen Isagi further upfield, who is instinctively dashing to a position where he can use his direct shot. Nagi passes the ball up to Isagi to get past Baru. Naruhaya is way too far behind to intercept with Isagi, so this allows Isagi to score the first goal of the match. Isagi's moves were already much sharper. All the middle steps were being polished and refined, as he was non-stop moving where he needs to be without the ball. This new way of thinking is quickly evolving Isagi's skills. He's not just positioning himself better, but he's also taking in more information of the area around him by opening himself up to more areas of the pitch, unintentionally already utilizing a sufficient level of off-the-ball movements. Just to bring up, reflex and off-the-ball movements are separate skills. However, reflex arguably would teach Isagi the usefulness of better off-the-ball movement. That may make this match seem useless if the whole point was to showcase Isagi first devouring Naruhaya's off-the-ball movements. However, he doesn't know the ins and outs of utilizing people's blind spots, so there's still a use for this match. With the score at 1-0, Naruhaya begins to mark Isagi as Isagi thinks of the struggles in which he'll have to face due to him lacking a reliable one-on-one weapon. He needed an answer in order to fend off both Baru and Naruhaya's pressure when he has the ball, as positioning alone won't carry him if he's being marked. And due to Isagi being marked at this time, he is unable to get past Naruhaya to stop Baru from getting past Nagi and scoring. It's now 1-1. Isagi starts with the ball, then passes to an area in which Nagi can reach it first, and just like the original, Nagi puts life into the ball with his first touch, getting past Baru to score. Isagi still needed to find his answer to handle one-on-ones himself now that Nagi has found a way. Baru starts with the next kickoff ball, and Isagi heads directly towards him, pressuring Baru once again. Nagi does the same, and they're able to steal the ball off Baru before he passes. Isagi pushed up with the ball and is face to face with Naruhaya once again. Simply moving on reflex won't be the factor that allows him to beat Naruhaya. He could pass the ball to Nagi, but he needs a one-on-one weapon to help him win matchups, like Naruhaya's weapon. Wait, Naruhaya's weapon? Taking advantage of blind spots? Isagi thinks back to what Rin said in their previous match. Pick up a book on how the human eye works. No wonder Isagi is so easy to beat in one-on-ones. His eyes are always set to where he wants to go next. Moving instinctually won't matter if his opponents can tell where he's heading, making him predictable for a counter. He could use this insight himself as well. As soon as they have to take their attention away from the player they're facing, that's when you use their blind spot to get past them. Isagi also knew that accessing blind spots was a weapon that he could use better than Naruhaya thanks to his spatial awareness and now instinctual movements to get to a position to use direct shot. Fusing them can make his formula to win one-on-ones. It quickly became apparent to both Baru and Naruhaya that they were outmatched compared to Nagi's weapon to trap and control the ball and score in inhuman ways, and Isagi's adaptability. Deeming Naruhaya useless as a teammate after stealing his weapon, the genius of adaptability was born. The match finishes in a score of 5-1, and Baru gets picked for Isagi and Nagi's team just like the original. However, this time Isagi doesn't even try to console Naruhaya, knowing that this match was too one-sided and not worth dwelling on. The match was so one-sided for a reason. Isagi was just the better player out the two average Joes on the pitch. Isagi is not afraid to break himself down and reconstruct his entire way of thinking and playing. That's what gave him the edge here. Little did Isagi know that he was taking his first steps into unlocking something far greater. The next match that Isagi's team will play against is the team of Chigiri, Kunigami, and Reo. However, Isagi's former teammates are unaware of his newfound abilities and theory. The match starts as it did originally. Baru being stubborn in his way of playing leads to him being outnumbered and then tackled by Reo, who runs upfield with the ball to pass to Chigiri to score the first goal. Isagi was hoping to work with Baru, but passing to Baru once again leads to him losing the ball, and this time the ball stays with Kunigami using his mid-range shot to get a goal. This isn't how it should be. Isagi knows that Baru is meant for much more, but he can't smell a possible goal for Baru at all. He's nothing but dead weight. However, Nagi with his many scenarios for goals leads to the same way that Nagi scored in the original, sparking the two's chemical reaction. The score is now 1-2. Isagi now realizes it's useless to try and work work with Baru, so instead he attempts to figure out a strategy to counter Reo and use Baru as bait to score a goal. Isagi's positioning of the ball, the way he can take advantage of other people's blind spots, and how he's accessing the best areas for his direct shot are all collaborating together for him to control the field. And after a third point is achieved by Kunigami, getting a pass to header it into the goal just like the original, Isagi's newest objective is clear. He needed to devour Baru. The goal possibilities with Nagi are becoming limited due to being marked by Chigiri, so Isagi at the kickoff decides to run towards Baru, baiting in Reo and Kunigami ready to steal the ball off Baru, but this is what Isagi had anticipated. He passes the ball to Nagi, but Reo is quick to warn Chigiri about Nagi's black hole trap. However, Nagi's scoring wasn't the motive, as he kept his eyes on Isagi as he was using the blind spots of everyone on the field, and Nagi is the only other player that can see this. He passes the ball to Isagi, who scores easily, 2-3. Isagi had successfully devoured Baru, and now he could utilize him throughout the game for his own benefit. As you can tell, Isagi moving by reflex doesn't change that he was doing all that he could to compensate for the lack of his teammates' cooperation, but there is a change in this match that we will get to soon. Reo begins the kickoff but is feeling an immense amount of pressure from Isagi, leading to Reo passing the ball to Chigiri, who passes long range to Kunigami. Baru is quick to intercept this pass ball, but loses it shortly after being tackled by a double team, and then an unforeseen Isagi had anticipated this entire scenario, snatching the loose ball and going upfield with the ball. Chigiri attempts to intercept, but Isagi also anticipated this. A calm pass was made towards Nagi, who is now unmarked, scoring a goal to tie up the game 3-3. Reo kicks off, and this is where our first change occurs in this match. Isagi actually predicts the pass towards Chigiri, unlike the original. As soon as the ball flew towards Chigiri, Isagi raced up the field to meet Chigiri at the end point. He was only able to get ahead thanks to the massive head start and prediction of where the ball would end up after Chigiri received the ball, in addition to Nagi stalling Chigiri enough to where he couldn't get up the field as quick. Isagi and Nagi practically had to make up for being a two-man team, so Isagi himself did not stop thinking, moving, and predicting where the ball would be. Whilst there was times that he couldn't reach the ball due to his lack of physical attributes, this was one of those situations where due to his reflexes, he was able to react in time to take advantage of someone even with a higher physical stat than him. It was due to the challenge and a combination of his off and on the ball weapons that Isagi in this match was entering into the state of flow. Chigiri attempts to pass with no goal path possible as Nagi was coming up also, but the pass gets blocked by Isagi, whose actions are moving instantaneously upon thinking. The loose ball flings up into the air and lands at the feet of Kunigami, where Baru couldn't stop him to achieve a goal, luck allowing him to score 3-4. Isagi was in absolute shock by the result of that goal. He did everything to hard counter Chigiri, yet somehow Kunigami got the goal in the end, and this was due to luck. This was a new factor he needed to consider to take advantage of. Baru in the next kickoff takes a shot from the starting line out of frustration and hits the post, leading to Kunigami getting the ball, but Nagi marked him. Kunigami makes a pass towards Reo, but Isagi is ready to intercept. The contested ball goes up into the air, and seeing the ball's trajectory, it will likely land to Baru, so Isagi races up the field in preparation for his next action. Now with the ball, Baru begins to dribble upfield, only a little bit away from his scoring range, but Chigiri was following close behind him, gaining ground on Baru fast. He would not be close enough to make a shot, and Isagi knew this. He had gone ahead of the ball and looks to Baru, demanding the ball from the corpse of the king. I'm waiting. Pass. Baru, like the original, felt forced to pass the ball up ahead and regrettably watched Isagi score another goal. With the score at 4-4, Baru's now feeling like he's filling the supportive role for the first time ever. Things play out much like the original, where Reo baits in Isagi to make a pass towards Chigiri, in which Nagi can intercept, and the loose ball lands directly in front of Baru once again. With Isagi and Nagi racing up ahead in order to assist Baru, the king of course has his existential crisis and refuses to accept a future where he plays the supporting role. With Baru's awakening, he executes a chop feint and then to an acute dribbling angle to rush past Kunigami. Isagi quickly realizes the situation whilst Nagi is in disbelief. Baru fakes a pass when approaching Reo so he can get consecutive chops, but Isagi this time is not in a position to act as a shield, instead Nagi is used to be that shield to get around Chigiri. However, Isagi met Baru at the end of the tunnel. He refused to accept this new reality in which Baru had constructed, his new immersion, an ego in which would not let him get this goal, even if it meant they'd lose. Baru is completely caught off guard by this pressure, allowing Isagi to steal the ball from himself, facing away from the goal, he executes his direct back heel. Baru's awakening may have not been predicted, but Isagi had adapted to it as soon as it happened, to use Baru to get his own goal, because that's what his ego desired. With white and blue puzzle pieced eyes, he looked to Baru whilst performing his direct back heel to say, "You're still no king of mine, so bow down to me, you donkey." The ball hits the net, making the score 5-4. The winners are the team of Isagi, Nagi, and Baru. Nagi was perplexed and Baru was absolutely livid. His goal was taken from him, and Nagi didn't understand why Isagi did that if Baru was clear to get the goal. Isagi gave no reasoning and looked to Baru saying, "Your awakening was unexpected, however, I refuse to let you rule over me anymore. So if you want your title as king back, why don't you earn it back by devouring me instead?" Baru had planned to devour Isagi in an attempt to use the light for his darkness to emerge, but he could have not predicted Isagi stealing the ball from his own teammate to score himself. His pride was hurt, but he had realised the potential for this team. His selfish chemical reaction with Isagi allowed for the two to continuously devour each other when needed on the field. Although Baru was rightfully pissed off, he was realising why Isagi was his main rival, the one he now must surpass to once again become king of the field. Isagi, Nagi, and Baru now had the decision of who of the opposing team to take with them to the next stage, and they would pick the one player who had evolved in order to keep up with them in this match, that being Chigiri, matching the events of the original story. They move forward, leaving friends behind, and Isagi, now with a collection of new knowledge, can face Rin once again. With his recent 3v3 match concluded, resulting in a victory, Isagi, along with his team of Nagi, Baru, and Chigiri, seek to challenge Rin's team once again. However, the knowledge in which Isagi had picked up in the prior match will prove to change the events of this showdown drastically. To begin the game, we have Isagi matching up against Bachelor like normal. However, this time, not only is Isagi more capable with keeping up with Bachelor's movements through use of his reflexive movements, but he's able to steal the ball himself without the use of Baru, in turn saving that anti-chemical reaction trick until later on. Isagi pushes up with the ball, and upon being face to face with Rin, he knows he lacks the physical capabilities in order to beat him on his own. So Isagi makes a pass to Chigiri down the wing, resulting in a much easier first point for their team. We see that even with the next kickoff starting as a much more team incorporated strategy on Rin's side, it's proven to be less effective. A better Isagi can take better approaches against a Rin who is still on the same level as he was in the original. Whilst individually Isagi is still outmatched, it doesn't take away from the fact that Isagi is a much harder player to get around. Rin needed to sacrifice his first goal to make a pass to Bachelor due to Isagi's quick responses, leading to Bachelor in this scenario being the first one to score for his team, but Isagi still makes his objective clear to devour Rin, as even with his better reaction speeds alongside better usage of his eyes, Rin always has some sort of contingency plan just in case he gets pressured too much. With the next kickoff, Nagi passes the ball down to the wing for Chigiri. Isagi would have reacted and found a blind spot away from the opposing cast, but now his reflexes and goal sense are telling him how much of a dead end that approach may be. Instead, Isagi charges directly ahead where Rin follows. Going too far on the outside, he would have immediately been anticipated by Rin, so safe to say he chose the better option here. Chigiri makes a pass to Isagi, and knowing he can't outmaneuver him right now, he makes a quick pass to Nagi. Bachelor attempts to intercept, but much like with Baru, Nagi's first touch breathes life into the ball, serving him well in getting past the monster dribbler, leading to him scoring the second goal for Isagi's team. Isagi may need some more time to analyse Rin's movements further, by either replicating it into his own style or adapting to it so he can beat Rin in a one-on-one situation, which is much more feasible than the original. Rin starts with the next ball, and he does need to utilise Bachelor, as much as doing so would make him less effective later on in the game. Bachelor getting the ball here does lead to the same Bachelor and RU chemical reaction goal like the main story. Being tied at 2 goals apiece, the momentum of this game was so much different. Isagi was primarily used as an assister, making passes to Nagi and Chigiri to get through, but now Isagi, before making his own push, had kept his eyes so closely on Rin they're practically hyperfixated, and that's when he sees it. What makes Rin so interesting is that he is always in the best possible position naturally, a position to grasp on an opportunity like Kunigami did in part 1 of the series. The reflex in which Isagi has to help execute his direct shot is unfortunately countered by someone with better physical specs and an already large grasp of high level positioning and spacing. Isagi had made his attempt to get Nagi's pass ball, but as expected, Rin caught up, and it was in this sequence that allowed Isagi to realise the next stage of his evolution. Baru, like the original, was the one to logically steal the ball from Isagi to score. And because I can't say these two words together, here's the text. Rin now has to adapt himself himself whilst Isagi was already moving beyond the control stage of Baru. What could I do to retrieve as much information as possible? Isagi had been facing away from Nagi as he was thinking, so Nagi called out to Isagi that the restart was going to commence. Isagi of course naturally turned his head to face Nagi, but in that moment he saw the other aspects of the field, such as where all the other opposing players are positioned. Wait. Is it really that simple? The restart begins and Isagi had immediately put his new formula to the test, mixing his spatial awareness, the fundamentals of optimal positioning from the unintentional luck of Kunigami, as well as Rin's naturally high level of the skill, and his obtained reflex from the beginning of the series. He was making use of all of them at the same time. He was also turning his head to absorb as much information on the pitch as he can, which led to him unknowingly using metavision for the very first time. For those who believe Hioris' advice unlocked metavision for Isagi during the third selection, this is half right, as instead he accessed a very incomplete variant of the ability whilst utilising flow to maintain it. At the time he lacked some of the pieces in which made that ability fully complete, but the balance of anxiety and boredom and how to get in the best position for his direct shot with the use of reflex allowed him to unlock flow, which has already happened in the 3v3 match in part 1. However, this match is the perfect opportunity for Isagi to discover his new abilities and mix them together, as he now has the fundamentals to do so, such as already knowing the aspect of luck from Kunigami, learning the optimal positioning details from Rin, of course having reflex, and finally, a little unintentional read of the field with a head turn which Kaiser unknowingly had shown Isagi whilst Isagi was seeking to replicate Kaiser's movements, referring to him as the ideal variant of himself during the NEL. Now he has unlocked his professional level weapon. Back to the story though, Isagi is clearly a much different player. To the audience we can see his metavision eyes for the very first time. Chigiri was tasked to try and keep Rin in check whilst putting the pressure on Bachara as well, and when Bachara got past Chigiri, he was shook seeing Isagi literally in his face moments later. Unfortunately they didn't kiss and instead Isagi stole the ball and started to exchange passes with Chigiri. Rin attempts to stop them, but now not only is Rin outnumbered, but his skill is being outmatched as Isagi shoots his direct shot that flies in between Rin's legs when his body weight shifted towards Isagi from the final pass made by Chigiri. Isagi scoring against Rin in an incredible fashion. However, as if it struck him like lightning, Isagi falls to his hands and knees in exhaustion. Even using metavision in such a short burst, it completely drained him of his stamina, as at this point in the story, Isagi is not even close to the level of physicality he was in the Manshine City game, and even in that game using the ability for not even the full match led to him passing out when the match had concluded. Chigiri was naturally the first one to check on him, reciting how amazing that goal was and if he needs any help. It's because of Isagi that Chigiri is at a higher level of energy than he would be if he was left to contest against Bachara and Rin on his own, but seemingly everyone is feeling the drain of this match as it's ongoing, and Isagi only just barely gets back to his feet and gathers his composure enough to start walking again. Isagi reached his limit with that one play, and the chances of him tapping into metavision again in this game is very unlikely, but he can still play as the anchor for the team whilst they are less at risk of losing being 2 goals up. Some events going forward are going to play out just like the original, such as the demonstration of Tokimitsu's high stamina and less fatigued state, leading to him being tackled by Chigiri and Baru to give a free kick opportunity to Rin. Isagi is still placed in the walls alongside Chigiri, but this time Isagi was going to jump to block Rin's shot from going over his head, but he couldn't. His legs gave out on him in this moment, and due to that, Rin made the score 4-3. It's hard to blame Isagi here, as he knew he couldn't be as reliable of a component if he was the lowest energy player currently playing. Isagi's team didn't have many other options left, so they decided to finally pull out their 4-player chemical reaction. Isagi playing as the individual who made the passes to lessen the strain he had, and when Isagi's use was fulfilled, it was now down to Nagi, Chigiri and Baru to make the final goal of the match. Bachara in this version of events didn't have the time to comprehend his own sense of loneliness, as during the time he felt it kicking in, it was the period where Isagi had scored and immediately suffered the drawbacks of his new awakening. Bachara was still enthusiastic to play as ever, and played well enough to stop Nagi from achieving the goal, so that responsibility was begrudgingly and unpredictably left to Baru. A couple of chop feints later against Tokimitsu and Rin, and Baru was the final goal scorer of this match. Isagi's team had won 5-3. The collaborative efforts of their team's chemical reaction, which instead utilised Baru's forward plays instead of Isagi's, was just as effective. Now, what's left is the final decision of who Isagi's team would pick to join their ranks. This was actually when Bachelor got a bit nervous, but Isagi quickly shut those worries down as he requested for Bachelor to join their team. Nagi was about to interject, but Baru interrupted and agreed with the fact that they need a solid passer. Having a passer means more goal scoring opportunities for him after all. Chigiri was inclined to agree, and Nagi, against his own want to pick Rin, accepted that Bachelor should join the team. It was an aspect of their team that they were severely lacking, as even Isagi and Nagi mentioned this at the time they were a team of two. And for anyone who believes that Isagi would instead pick Rin instead of Bachelor, his issues of getting the ball stem from a lack of a passer that understands him. Bachelor was the best person to support Isagi due to their chemistry, and of course led to Isagi promising he would steal back Bachelor. Nagi stating that Isagi would pick Rin if they won was purely from Nagi's perspective of how he thought he understood Isagi's mindset, and whilst Isagi would want to outperform Rin, he had already done that by winning this game, so he would see no other need to pick him for his team compared to Bachelor. Even if you still disagree with me, this is how I see the story playing out, and honestly it's much more interesting this way. Bachelor was completely relieved that Isagi stuck to his promise, and the first team of 5 made their way to advance as they left the top 3 in the dust. Isagi was holding on to Nagi as they were walking due to his stamina being metaphorically in the bin. They arrived in the next room where Ego congratulates the team and specifically points out Isagi's evolution. Addressing the state that he tapped into was known as flow, an explanation of the immersed state before the original provided Isagi with much more clarification on how he could maintain it going forward. Ego also announces the match against the World 5 will commence as their final match as a team. They would all have to prepare for that time to come, so they of course get to work. Each player of the team of 5 conditioning themselves. Isagi was especially working on improving his physical specs, realizing it was his only way of maintaining his latest discovered ability. The time comes for the 5 of them to meet the World 5 on the same pitch, and that will conclude our part 2 of this series. When finally setting foot onto the pitch, Isagi can now size up his opponents to start testing himself against the World 5 players, and in what seemed to be in a rather mocking manner on the World 5's behalf, they treated this game kind of like a joke. Of course no one on Isagi's team can understand a word from the opposition they face, so they all get into positions for the match's kickoff, with Isagi and Bachelor starting the exchange. The World 5 don't try that hard to stop Isagi's team's push, whilst Isagi starts with utilising Bachelor as the pass anchor, and then Chigiri as the crosser down the wing. Nagi, upon receiving the ball, manages to do a back pass towards Isagi's position past Luna and Pablo. All the while, Isagi briefly taps into his metavision for the best positioning possible to score the first point of the game. It was quite an impressive goal, and Loki admits he was even impressed by that display of skill by Isagi. But we should all know how this would actually go past this point. With the World 5 actually ramping it up a notch, they quickly demolish Isagi's team. Each player of the World 5 besides Luna had scored, making the current score 1-4. Isagi was greatly frustrated, but also amazed at the level that the World 5 were at. He knows he has an exceedingly long way to go before even matching up against the opposing team's youngest player, Loki. Their final chance is now underway. Bachelor, upon receiving the ball, lets Isagi run wild with all that he has left in the tank by passing him the ball, only for our main character to finally match up against Luna in the process. Luna gives a big compliment to Isagi, reciting that he reminds him of another player who currently plays for Spain, but of course he still has a long way to go yet before competing on his level. Plus, Isagi couldn't understand a single word he was saying. Luna effortlessly steals the ball from Isagi, who couldn't react quick enough to respond to Luna's movements, even with Metavision active. Luna makes his way upfield to score with relative ease. With the final score being 1-5, there was still a large gap yet to be taken up by the best Blue Lock team of 5 Blue Lock had to offer. Of course, this match was both a test for them, but more so a showcase of results for Ego himself to see Blue Lock's progress. But our team of 5 put in an immense amount of hard work in the remaining time period whilst knowing what their next benchmarks are. This was all before the remaining 30 players had completed the second selection and played in their World 5 matches. Transitioning into the results room, the first team to enter was of course our main team of Isagi, Nagi, Baru, Chigiri and Bachelor. Team number 2 was the team of Rin, Ryu, Tokimitsu, Zantetsu and Kiora, seemingly making the same choices as Nagi, Baru and Chigiri in the episode Nagi manga. Of course, if you disagree with the picks Rin's team made in this scenario, it really doesn't matter because all the teams that followed were the same as the original, which includes the loss of Kunigami to Shido. Isagi was surprised by Kunigami not being in attendance, but this was Blue Lock after all. It wasn't certain everyone Isagi knew was capable of being the world's best striker. This was merely the process of Blue Lock. We cut forward a bit as we get our usual spiel regarding how Blue Lock will face up against Japan's U20 team and Sai Itoshi for the fate of Blue Lock to be decided. Winning means Ego takes control of Japan's U20 team, losing means Blue Lock will be shut down, leaving everyone in the facility without a proper chance to prove that they could become the world's best striker. Then finally comes the announcement of the top 6 players in the third selection. Results based off of goals scored in the first selection, feedback from the World 5, and of course Ego's own judgment judgment. The number 1 player currently in Blue Lock is Rin, with Isagi just behind in 2nd place. This just makes the most sense considering Ego will intentionally give Isagi something to further strive towards. This was the motion set in place as Ego had handpicked Isagi to be in his image as a player who has the same kind of brain that he does, all the while striving as a talented learner. This was revealed during the NEL arc after all. Isagi is also behind Rin due to Isagi at this time still being an individually worse player than Rin, and Rin has likely gotten a lot more goals with his first selection journey, not to mention he was one of the 3 players to score against the World 5 team like the original story. 3rd place is Shido as the other individual who scored against the World 5, and as you'd expect, 4th, 5th and 6th are Karasu, Otoya and Yukimiya, and our 7th placement player actually goes to Baru. As with less opportunity for Nagi to show off more of his innovative side due to winning with Isagi in this scenario against Rin's team, it results in who I deem to be the next worthy individual to be within the top 7, plus Bachelor's lack of awakening in the story is also a reason why he isn't 7th instead. The top 6 go on their merry way into their own rooms. Isagi was surprised to know that Rin was still considered above himself, so the only way to settle who's truly better would be in a final eventual clash between the 2 of these players on opposite teams, but for now they must learn to properly coexist. Moving forward, I could give an immense amount of detail regarding how every single match in this 3rd selection actually occurs, but we don't actually have time for that, so I will just be covering the first match played. The original story shares similarities with our scenario. Hioris and Nanase both get picked first to join Isagi and Rin's team, alongside with Nagi. Nagi still believes he can learn a lot from Isagi, and considering their compatibility on the field, it would surely showcase Nagi's best skills at the moment. And on the opposite team, we of course have the original team of Chigiri and these 2 jobbers. This match is the initial main demonstration to Ego why Isagi and Rin best fit on a team as forwards. Isagi's ability to keep pace with Rin constantly whilst using metavision, even whilst this was underdeveloped, produces insane results. Not to mention, Nagi and Chigiri refuse to sit back and let their development be outshined by Isagi's new evolution. In addition to the events of this match, there occurs an interesting conversation I would like to provide, which is the first proper interaction of Isagi and Hioris. It all came full circle now. Hioris is super impressed at Isagi, asking him some questions in between goals, and whilst Hioris can't give anything new to help Isagi improve in this current game, since this what if has already allowed Isagi to obtain Hioris' advice early, he remarks that Isagi is on the right path in order to keep up with the players who on the surface are much more individually capable than he is, but instead of now improving on his strengths, why not tackle his weaknesses? Isagi is confused, but Hioris can't give answers himself on how he should improve, so it comes down to Isagi himself to figure that out. What is his drawbacks? And how should he tackle them head on? The score of this match ends 5-3, with Nagi and Karasu scoring 1 goals for their individual sides, with Rin, Isagi and Shido scoring 2 goals for their sides as well. Isagi contemplates on what he should do next for him. He's not lacking in vision of the field or analysing plays at the moment, but he knows to maintain this currently unnamed ability to him, he needed to train in physicality. But can that get more specific? What would hold him back from getting a goal even through his efforts in building up an attack with his eyes? He decides to leave the thought process for now and revisit it at a later date, and as the rest of the matches conclude, Rin and Isagi's team stay undefeated as their level of understanding between each other far surpasses the other top 6 players' duo dynamics. Isagi and Rin understanding their individual desires to use each other to get goals for themselves is just the kind of twisted relationship these 2 need to have in order to strive and evolve. With the time that they have left, Isagi and Rin continue their constant training to compete with each other and also be ready for the match-offs between Sai Itoshi and the Japan U20 team. Ego of course provides his explanation of flow, and this is Isagi's moment to truly realise what he's been accessing all this time. Some much needed context in how Isagi can hold this immense state more effectively and provide him with more context of how to improve himself. Once again, going back to that very same idea in ensuring his goal chances aren't foiled. A couple more training days later and we can finally end this part off with the reveal of the Blue Lock 11 team. Hey, Future Raven here. I forgot the timeline. The timeline is supposed to be that they have the formation revealed to them, and then they go into training and then learning about the flow, because during that time, Ego is still picking substitutions for the Blue Lock 11. My apologies, I don't read my own manga. My belief was that this was a good place to leave off the part, but this was not in fact how they ended off the events of the 3rd selection before going into the U20 match. My apologies, it doesn't really affect the outcome of the story anyway, so don't mind this, it's just a slight hiccup. A lot of the positions stay the same, with the only difference being Baru actually being on the starting lineup, leaving Otoya as a sub. And yes, Shido is once again picked to be Sai Itoshi's choice of striker from Blue Lock. It seems things are heating up, but how about we save the U20 match for the next part? What will happen with Baru being a starting player? How will Isagi's rapid development in this what if change the field of play? And how will Sai Itoshi view Isagi now that he's a much bigger threat than the original story? The day of Blue Lock versus the Japan U20 team has arrived, and our players enter into the corridor to prepare the make or break, the do or die for Blue Lock's existence. After introductions and national anthems have finished, it was time for the kickoff, starting with Blue Lock's side. Isagi and Rin knew their strategy, setting up foundation in a circular triangular formation, but Isagi, with his ever-expanding routes and possibilities, seek to go beyond this idea. Whilst tapping into Metavision constantly would drain him of all of his stamina, he has put his reflexive thinking into practice commonly, and is now pushing to the front way earlier than any defender could keep up with, and instead of Bachara, he passes back to Chigiri. He needed Chigiri's speed to keep up with his own lack of hesitation and sent for a goal spot, and with that focus on physicality, Isagi was also a faster, more coordinated, and more responsive player. Chigiri delivers a centering pass over to Isagi, low enough for Isagi to trap before IQ can intervene, as this time Isagi wouldn't go for the goal instantly. It was not currently within his capacity, as he wasn't aware of Japan's Iron Wall defense's capabilities. He plays it smart and makes a through pass to Rin on his right, just as Rin managed to shake off Neo. This would lead to IQ positioning himself between the pair of egoists, but now even Nagi was approaching the goal box. IQ had no way to compensate for the three players, so he needed to directly go after Rin and block off his routes, which gave Isagi a clear path to the goal. Rin makes a tight shot onto the goal, but is deflected by IQ, and after the ball hits the post, the loose ball lands to Isagi, in which he is about to shoot, but Sai is now seen on his tail. Isagi can outreach Sai by being just one step ahead, but Sai Itoshi, like the original, would bump Isagi off balance, shattering his possibilities of scoring. But the change in this instance was that Baru was now also on the front lines. He snatched the broken opportunity from Isagi to reforge it. A light faded into darkness for the king to thrive, scoring the first goal of the match to the shock of Sai Itoshi and all in attendance in the arena, aside from Isagi and Ego Jinpachi. Isagi had little chance of scoring, but at least he would be able to play as the bait to draw all the attention from Japan's prodigy, as Nagi and Rin handled the other defenders. The score was at 1-0 for Blue Lock, and Isagi is motivated to get the next goal. Sai has seemingly underestimated the team. Since they were already performing at a higher level than the original story, he had no choice but to up the ante. He wouldn't allow the Japan U20 team to make more than one error, so if he had to, he would be the one to score. Sai, upon getting the next ball, does a precise pass to the front into Kenta's possession. The same instance of how Sai sets up for his first goal still happens, but now Isagi was getting involved in defense. Thanks to that higher level of spatial awareness, he is able to more accurately depict the goal spots on the field his opponents can take advantage of. Isagi was now actively anticipating Sai to prevent him from making his original story goal by standing in the very spot Sai would shoot from. All the while Chigiri made up the distance and intercepted the ball, an action that left Sai slightly stunned, but he quickly regained his composure. Isagi had a lot of ground to make up for now that he was on the other side of the pitch. Chigiri would get the ball back upfield, but Isagi won't be there in time for an attack. So Karasu compensates and goes into Isagi's offensive midfielding position. Chigiri makes another cross, but this time over to Nagi, who traps the ball in front of Neo and propels it diagonally over to Yukimiya on the left wing. Tepe of course stands as his opposition, and this acts like their first encounter to one another, where Yukimiya is taken aback by Tepe's speedy defense. Tepe's interception leads to Nagi picking up the slack, and now he's actually shoulder to shoulder with the bulky Neo. Karasu calls for a pass and Nagi obliges, but Aiku cuts off the passing route just before Karasu gets the incoming ball. It's becoming evident that Japan's iron defense is now more conditioned for the pushes, but maybe it was because of Isagi not being on the front lines, so no one could effectively come up with a strategy to break through. Aiku, who was about to pass to Sai, realizes that Sai was being pinned by Isagi. This change in formation made Isagi now the primary person capable of limiting Sai's options, and this is much more effective than Karasu can be, because now Isagi for the time being was using Metavision. Even so, Metavision is still not enough to overcome the gap of Japan's prodigy player, but it makes it much easier for the rest of Blue Lock's team to stop his attacks, starting from his passes. Sai admires Isagi's talents and admits that he's beyond the majority of players on the field with those eyes, but he too was experienced with that level of football. It's not confirmed that Sai Itoshi has metavision, it's only highly speculated by Isagi himself and theorized by audience members of the Blue Lock series. But there's no doubt that Sai likely has the experience of dealing with users of metavision throughout his professional career. And thankfully for Sai, he still has the physical advantage over a metavision Isagi, who still needs to tap into his flow state in order to use the ability. Isagi was also being extremely wary with the weapon. Overuse of this ability, as he knows from previous matches he's had, has immense drawbacks to his stamina gauge and would be catastrophic to occur this early into this important match. Sai was able to get the pass ball from Aiku by separating from Isagi more so than he expected, and then does an elastico around our main character, but Isagi didn't leave much margin for error as he responded quickly by staying on Sai's tail. Sai ups the ante even more and stalls back and nutmegs Isagi to Isagi's utter dismay. He was seemingly getting too arrogant, thinking that he could take on Sai on his own, but he managed to stall him long enough for Rin to intervene, and from this they do their initial match off, where it looked like Isagi and Rin are sharing the same level of challenge against Sai in different ways. Isagi has a problem physically. He has the mindset to keep up with Sai's innovation, but lacks the physicality to take advantage, hence why he needed someone like Chigiri to stop Sai from scoring, whilst Rin can prepare for Sai's professional football techniques. This instance overall leads to Sai Itoshi not giving the U20 strikers the time of day. He instead forces them to make a pass back to him, which leads to a curve shot to the top left corner that Gargamaro could not save. The score was now 1-1, but Blue Lock started with this next ball with enough time on the clock to get a goal lead. Factoring in that Nagi has yet to score like he did in the original, and Rin clearly wants to get one over his brother, but without needing to replicate what would be a tricky shot for him to pull off, who would get this next goal? Well, the restart leads to a decision from Karasu. He is still the foundation of this team's offense and defense, so he needed to make a solid call on who would be the best player to take the ball. Yukimiya was tempting, but he was at a speed disadvantage. Nagi had a battle against brute muscle, Baru was being monitored by players even on the midfield due to his unorthodox playstyle, and Isagi and Rin had IQ to deal with. So he took it upon himself, rushing forward to execute his unique dribbling style to break through the defensive midfielders and make a pass over to Chigiri for assistance. Chigiri gets to the end of his dash and tries passing back to Karasu, however this is where Sai could see an interception, but so could Isagi. Karasu was shocked twice over seeing Sai and Isagi gunning for his opportunity, and Isagi sets himself up for a direct shot, but it's deflected by Oliver Aiku. The ball lands to Rin, who swiftly replicates his brother's curve shot to the upper left corner of the net for Blue Lock's point advantage. The halftime whistle blows in this instance earlier than usual, with a current score at 2-1. Of course, quite predictably, the same events of the halftime occur, aside from one big change. Ego personally pulls Isagi aside for an interaction, one that goes unknown to the rest of the team. For the rest of this match, Yuichi, use that strength of yours. Surge to the top and let your aspirations carry you further than what your body can withstand. Do that without falter, and this game will end in our victory. And that is no prediction. That is a spoiler. Isagi seems slightly bewildered, sacrificing his physicality for the sake of maintaining this weapon that overcame the likes of Rin and challenged the World 5. He wasn't ready to bow out and was thinking of preserving himself to the final moments, but Ego wants him to use this weapon for the whole second half? Why? Shido, as we should all guess, is brought on to help the Japan U20 team claw at a victory, and whilst his original goal and substitutes of Blue Lock characters Chigiri and Nico for Hiyori and Reo stay the same, what doesn't stay the same is Isagi's whole body language. Rin is tempted to comment on Isagi's almost too composed state, but Isagi has rapidly taken in the field of play, routes to goal spots instead of just the spots themselves. Each player, and even the newest goal scorer of Shido, are all being factored into his equations. Rin seems intimidated. He knew this side of Isagi from the second selection, and Isagi broke almost instantly every time he used this ability. But Isagi has not moved enough to strain himself the entire time, since Isagi has found his own interpretation of using this ability for now. Study, gather, perform, adapt, win. The restart ball for Blue Lock now has the merit of a defensive winger being highly capable of providing passes to the front lines. Hiyori gets the ball from Isagi himself, and Hiyori responds appropriately. He has many options at his disposal, but only one has an unwavering route to the goal, and that was Isagi. Aiku stood in Isagi's path, but it was too late. Shido's flow state has yet to happen, and therefore has yet to be the catalyst to light the fire under his new teammates. So in this match, Isagi was the first person visible enough enough to tell that he was entering into his flow state. Whilst tapping into this state briefly was easy to do, not just because Isagi's experienced with it now, but preserving his stamina alongside it, maintaining it would only work if everything that Isagi would do from here on out would be heavily optimized. Isagi looked as if he was about to physically challenge Aiku. The defender didn't expect this approach from someone who is far outmatched in this category, but Isagi seemed too far in this motion to stop. Or well, that was only supposed, as Isagi had stepped away from Aiku at the final moment as the ball went over the pair's heads in a precise key pass as if Sai Itoshi struck the ball. Off the ball movements, blind spots, and spatial awareness, all combined with reflexive thinking, has made this one-on-one a cinch. Isagi shoots the precise moment he was able to, a direct shot that gets the goal, and lands Blue Lock their third point. Now let's be honest guys, with a Metavision Isagi alongside a Baru that's already on the pitch, do you really think this would end in Japan U20's favour? To summarise, Sai and Shido very well could get another goal for their team, but what will stop Blue Lock from just overwhelming Japan's team's defence, playing into that ideal structure Ego wanted? Score more goals than the opposing team. And what keeps Isagi from overexerting himself was the physicality training on a consistent basis since finishing the second selection, alongside his adrenaline fueling him to push past the strain to win this game for Blue Lock, which also makes him an overwhelming obstacle for the Japan U20 team that only allows the likes of Sai Itoshi to combat with, especially when Sai starts getting serious. So Blue Lock, with this offensive advantage, manages to secure 2 more goals. One scored by Nagi thanks to the now upgraded chemical reaction with Isagi, who can now see so many more of Nagi's possible goal scoring routes, and the final goal scored by Isagi, of course, using Rin Otoshi's awakening fueled by his hideous desires, revolving around the sickening companionship of his teammates and the expectations of his brother. The game ends at a score of 5-3 for Blue Lock, a much more substantial and dominant performance compared to the original that leaves Isagi more prepared than ever for the NAL arc, which therefore leaves Rin working hard as hell to try and keep up with his new rival. Then the events of the NAL arc conclude the drastic changes that this what if scenario provided, as Isagi just has an easier time with combating with the likes of Kaiser as a rival and all of his opposing teams thanks to his improved physicality and better understanding of his Metavision ability. But of course he wouldn't be able to confront his other weaknesses and gaps of knowledge without the events of the NAL arc driving his discoveries of other players' mentalities, ideals, and why the gap between him and Rin alongside other physically gifted players was so obvious. Basically, Isagi will have an easier time, and eventually it will all fall back into place with the current level of Isagi the further you get into the series, aside from Isagi's experience with his now fully developed Metavision being older than it originally was. But this is how I see the ending of this what if going. How do you guys think Isagi would perform in the NAL if he unlocked Metavision early? Would he have scored more goals, or would he become even more of a target than usual for the opposing teams to shut him out? And how would he fare against a Rin who better understands Metavision as an ability, and more specifically how Isagi uses it? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below, and once again be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more videos and even more what ifs. This has been the full series of what if Isagi got Hioris advice early.